Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. just wrapped up his three-day state visit to China, a trip China expects will usher in a new golden age of bilateral ties. While meeting Chinese President Xi Jinping, President Marcos Jr. said, according to a readout from the Chinese side, China is the strongest partner of the Philippines and nothing can hold back the continuation and development of bilateral friendship, and that he will be opening a new chapter in our comprehensive strategic cooperation. So what was discussed between leaders from both sides during the visit? What has been achieved through the visit for both countries and the region? What about maritime disputes that have been a source of difference standing in the way? I'm pleased to be joined from Manila, the Philippines, by Herman Tiu Laurel, president of a Manila-based think tank, Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies Institute. Also from Manila, Zhang Song, Manila Bureau Chief at Shanghai Wenhui Daily, and from Haikou, Southern China's Hainan Province, by Dr. Yan Yan, Director of the Research Center of Oceans Law and Policy at the National Institute for South China Sea Studies. The warmest welcome to all of you. So, on the afternoon of January the 4th, Chinese President Xi Jinping held talks with visiting Philippine President Marcos Jr. at the Great Hall of the People, and the highest honor was given to him as a state guest. Mr. Laurel, let me go to you. How do you look at the importance that's given to the Chinese host, to the Filipino president by the Chinese host?
Well, I'm very happy about the reception of President Bongbong Marcos, hosted by President Xi Jinping. It was very impressive. We watched it on TV, the 21-gun salute and all the honors. And I think that was very important for the Philippine audience to see how much priority, as President Xi Jinping says, China gives to the Republic of the Philippines. And for a few months, we were worried back in Manila that it was so low-key, this visit, that we were wondering what the message was behind it. And also on the part of President Bongbong Marcos, he had been quite vacillating or ambiguous with regards to the strongest partnership that he expressed before, because there was too much static and noise unfriendly to China in the past month or two, wrapping off to this visit. But finally, all the fears have been set aside. Being the first stop of President Bongbong Marcos outside of ASEAN is a confirmation that the continuity from the President Duterte's policy of pivot to China and to Asia is going to be continued under President BBM. So that's very, very important news for us advocates here in the Philippines of strongest and stronger Philippine-China ties.
I noticed a very interesting detail, which is sort of a stroll down memory lane when President Xi talked about, recalled the father of President Bongbong Marcos and the Chinese leaders of older generations. And Marcos also, in his remarks, he said this was a trip that he had long looked forward to, quote unquote. And he underscored his privilege of being part of history in the establishment of diplomatic ties 48 years ago in 1975. So, Mr. Zhang, help us understand that story and why this relationship or this trip is particularly significant for President Bongbong Marcos himself.
Yes, this trip is very significant for President Marcos, but it's not his first trip to China. As we all know, he was with his mother, then First Lady Imelda Marcos, when they visited in Beijing and meet with elder generation leaders. And later, he became governor and he became senator and he visited China for many, many times. But this trip is very different because this is the first trip after he became president of the Philippines. So I think he wants to tell Chinese president that he is very much convinced that he as a kind of witness of the Philippine-China relationship. He wants to connect his first trip to China and this trip, and to further develop his relationship with Chinese leadership.
Dr. Yan, let's go to the different areas of cooperation both sides underscored. President Xi talked about 4 pillars, which include agriculture, infrastructure, energy, and people-to-people exchanges. And for the Filipino side, they also said that they jointly witnessed the signing of cooperation documents of Belt and Road cooperation, agriculture, fishery, infrastructure, finance, customs, e-commerce, and tourism. How do you look at the specific areas of cooperation that both sides are putting their emphasis on?
I think that the bond and tie between China and the Philippines are very unique and very special. On the one hand, we're both claimant states in the South China Sea issue, but on the other hand, and more importantly, China and the Philippines are not just neighbors for thousands of years. So it reminds us that it is our common interest and responsibility to maintain the peace and stability both in the South China Sea and also in the Asia-Pacific region. Well, as President Marcos said many times before, that the South China Sea should not represent the whole of the China-Philippine relationship, and it should not be the obstacle for China-Philippine cooperation. And thus, for the 4 pillars, I think that we do already have conducted many maritime cooperations between the 2 countries, but we also have high hopes for the 4 pillars in the future. And I'm sincerely hoping that this visit, President Marcos' this time's visit, will be a new era of maritime cooperation in the future for the 2 countries.
According to the Chinese readout, there is this one sentence which says, according to President Xi, China will work with the Philippines to continue to properly handle maritime issues through friendly consultation, resume negotiations on oil and gas exploration, promote cooperation on oil and gas exploration in non-disputed areas. Help us understand, what does that mean exactly?
Talking about oil and gas cooperation, we do need to talk about the MOU signed by the 2 countries back in the year 2018. And after that, we have established the government level committee and also a working group. So we have been pushing forward the oil and gas cooperation and joint development projects for the past 4 years. So I think that when President Marcos taken the office, he has expressed many times of his sincere wish that he wanted to make it forward and to make a future.
What exactly does that mean? That the 2 countries will shelve their differences for the time being while continue to negotiate and cooperate where they can, which is to jointly explore oil and gas resources in the region? Is that what it says?
Yes, I think that oil and gas exploration and cooperation is a very important confidence-building measure in the South China Sea. We do want to see a concrete cooperation in terms of resources sharing, which fits the Chinese policy of sharing the dispute and making forward for the joint development. So I think that it's we're very happy to see Philippines echoing China's policy and suggestion, and we're hoping that the President Marcos visit will be an open and new era of maritime cooperation, especially oil and gas cooperation.
Yeah. President Marcos said that maritime issues don't define the totality of our relationship with China, but he acknowledges the importance of this issue. So, Mr. Zhang, do you see this going to be a fine balance for Mr. Marcos going forward? And also, how is he going to balance the relationship between the United States and the Philippines and China and the Philippines?
Actually, maritime dispute between China and the Philippines is very small, and it doesn't touch the day-to-day life of Philippine people, but it's very sensitive and significant So this time, China and the Philippines have kind of understanding between two different foreign ministries to communicate at the time of any kind of conflict. So I think that's very important.
That's part of the agreements that they're signing.
Yes, but still the two countries have to work on other issues. For example, code of conduct. I think two countries should work together to make it happen, maybe within this year. And of course, Philippine-US kind of relationship is also very, very different. The Philippines is the only ally for the America in Southeast Asia. So they are very much dependent, and especially when BBM became the president, the American side actively lobbied to persuade this new Philippine administration to be more in favor of America when it comes to this national security issue. So I think the BBM government is very aware of that. They are trying to seek a balance.
Yeah, Mr. Laurel, you want to add one sentence really quickly, please?
Yes, Mr. Zhang Song brought up an important issue, the South China Sea dispute, which really is, I agree, a very, very small part. And in fact, I think it's practically forgotten by the great masses of the Filipino people because the economic crisis and all these other concerns are paramount. But there are elements, including the commercial elements here mentioned by Zhang Song, Manny Pangilinan, that are interested in obstructionism in order to get what they want from the joint oil gas projects and other projects. So it's important for President Bongbong Marcos, when he comes home, to be firmer with his strongest partnership with China, shift aside all these criticisms and questions, because I think one of the dangers of his administration is being too soft on the Americans, allowing military games here. There is no enemy. China is not an enemy. And so I think he has to come back home with a firmer resolve. And I hope the discussions with President Xi Jinping will steel his spine on this issue that China is not an enemy. Even in the South China Sea, everything will be resolved so that we can live happily ever after.
Yeah, of course, fingers crossed, but for the benefits of the Philippines, that is. Many thanks for my guests, Mr. Herman Laurel, Zhang Song, and Dr. Yang Yan for joining us in this discussion. Thank you very much.